Record. Chapter 6, we're talking about functions. This is the second day. I started scribbling down to the right here the code listings that were due for this so that I can reference them. And as we go through, it doesn't hurt to have your book or to have the code listings. Sometimes we'll shortcut them, and like we're going to today. So code listing 17 is one that you typed in, and it comes under the title of a global variable. And somebody is now going to tell me what a global variable is, what's its advantages, what's its disadvantages, things like that. So who is Batman? What is a global variable?
A global variable is a variable that can be accessed anywhere in the program.
Okay, stop there. Access anywhere in the program. What do you mean by that? Go ahead. That's Pete. No, that wasn't Peter. Was that you, Chad?
It was Alex.
Alex. Go ahead, Alex. What do you mean access anywhere in the program?
It's not specific to any function.
Okay. So now we're dealing with functions, right? There's a way to declare a variable that I can use in my main, I can use in my functions, and I can change it in my functions. And the changes stick, right? I'll buy all that.
Yeah.
What else? Where
is it listed outside the main?
Yeah, it's declared in a funny spot. It's declared before the main. So we should probably put that in and declared before main. Could I create a local variable in a function that's the same name and cause confusion?
I think so.
Yeah. So that's one thing that we want to be careful about. We might want to give it a really good name so that I don't accidentally screw it up inside of a function, or somebody's writing a function and they're giving it to you because we broke up into groups and each group's doing a part, and they write a function, and then you wrote the main and you're trying to put it all together and you create a global variable, and all of a sudden we got messed up names going back and forth and we cause confusion. So when you declare it for the main, give it a really good name. The one in the code listing was num, and that would scare me. I might call it global num to make it more distinctive and better for us to understand. Okay. Anybody add anything else to global? You typed in code listing 22, and this was a static variable. And you've seen that public static void data data data. And we're not really going to get into all of that. But in code listing 22, we have a static variable. And if you're looking in your book, it's on page 349. But what's a static variable?
I think it retains whatever change you make to it, no matter what function you're working.
Okay. So you're right, but you're also describing a global variable a little bit.
So it's like a local variable.
Yeah, it's a local variable in a function, okay? And when we add the word static to it, what we're saying is when I leave the scope of this function, it stays alive. So when I come back into the function again, if it got a value when it left, it retained that value coming in. So keeps its value. And when you looked at code listing 22, there was one, and we use the word in front of it, static, and we say static int was stat num. Okay, so that means every time I come in that function, it's still going to hold on to its value. And that's kind of nice. When you take CPS 162, for those of you who are just loving this, and you're going to take 162, you're going to learn a lot more about static variables, static functions. And I'll give you an example of a static function, but in a different language. In Java, we have methods instead of functions. In Java, is there a method that you could use that wasn't part of a class that we had to instantiate an object of? I should say that again. Were there ever any methods that you could just use from a class that you didn't have to instantiate an object of that class? So I'll tell you, math class, string. Yeah, string works a little funky, but yeah, it works in the same way. String, we actually do use the object. We do like str1.length. But if you think about the math class, I just say math in front of .pal. I didn't have to have an object name. We also talked about the character class. I would put the class name character in front of it and not an object name. So those are actually static methods that you can just use. You just have to put the class name in front of them so you know where to go find them. But as I said, you don't need to instantiate an object to go with it. See, if we were in the classroom, we'd have the door open, so anybody walking down the hall would hear us using all these big words, and they'd be like, man, that class sounds tough. That sounds like a good class. Anybody want to add anything else to what a static variable is? Okay. You typed in code listing 624. You had default arguments. You had default arguments. These are values declared. Where did we declare those? In the prototype or the function name?
Prototype.
In the prototype? Good. And in the example, we declared two of them. So if I used a default, I would get those two values. If I only pass one argument in, it would only change the first and I'd get the default of the second. And if I change two or pass two arguments in, it would erase them all. So you saw that example in 624. It was called display stars and it was all hunky-dory. All right. We wanted to cover those at the speed we covered them. We gave them due justice, and it may be something that, you know, you pick up as an extra that you like, and you want to use a global variable for a reason, or a static for a reason, or include default arguments for a reason. So they're three good things. They're in our inventory and they're tucked away. All right, some good stuff. The next two things that we're going to cover to finish out chapter 6 are good stuff, okay? Well, way back when we first started talking about functions, we said there were two types. There was the void function, and there was the value returning function. So we either had void or value returning. And the value returning only let me return one value. Well, what if I'd like to manipulate multiple variables instead of just a return type? Well, what we're doing now, yes, we're happy. In code listing 26, we saw this thing called a reference variable. Okay, so up to this point, if I would have just said double none int, an int, just an int, not an int ampersand. If I just had an int there, I would be passing by value, and that's it. Okay, a value flew over. When we came back, nothing ever got changed. In fact, if you ever had, let's see, Visual Basic actually lets you put in by val and by ref, by val or by ref, so you can tell, do you want to just send the value over and protect the variable, or do you want to send the variable address over? So this guy right here is sending the variable address over through the air. So now the address won't change, but when I make changes in the function, the value at that address would in fact change. So this is cool. I can send in the address. I can go there, right? It's going to receive it in here. We're going to have a name, ref var. So if I make changes to ref var, the changes stick because all I'm sending back is the address. So now all of a sudden I got this really neat thing, this reference variable, and I'm happy that I can do 1, 2, 3, 4. In code listing 26, we had a nice starter example. It's a void method. It's passing in to get a user number, okay? Enter a number, and remember, this is just the address. So I can go to the variable name at the address, put a number in. What goes back is the address, and when I use it later, it'll actually have the good value for me. So when I come up here and I say get number, it's a reference variable. I pass in val, it's going to fly over, val comes back, and I'm able to send it into another one, double it and come back, and I can print it out. So passing by, it's a reference variable, passing by value. Questions? Now this is one of those that it's like, I think I got it, but in a few minutes, we're actually going to start programming, and I'm going to give you something that you're actually going to have to get your hands dirty with, because I think that's when you start to understand it. The last thing, it was like section 614, was something called overloading functions, okay? Have you overloaded anything before? The answer is Bueller. Somebody say yes.
Yes.
Yes, right? Because we had this rectangle equals new, whatever it was, and then we had empty parentheses. And then we had rectangle, we instantiated an object of type rectangle, and we would throw in just a single number 6. And how did we have that constructor set up? We had a constructor that if it was null, I gave the length of value and the width of value. If it was a single value coming in, I used the second constructor, and it made the length and the width both 6. And then we overloaded it a third time so that the length would be 4 and the width would be 2. So we overloaded constructors back in the rectangle class. That was my 121s, we did that. If anybody needed to see it, we could always post it. We did something similar to that with the first program of the year. We talked about overloading. So we can talk about overloading functions as well. How would I overload them? I'm going to, by definition, it will be the same name, but different I just used this word the other day. We played hangman. We talked about it. Different signature. Very good. Different signature. That means it has a different parameter list. Just like our constructors. They were the same name. They had different signatures. So when we start talking about overloading functions, you didn't type it in, and I probably should have it typed in, but we're looking at code listing 627. And if you take a look at it, you see the prototypes. I have a function named square. I have a function named square. If an integer is being passed in, it's going to use this guy, and it's going to return an integer. If a double is being passed in, it's going to use this prototype and return a double. So same names, different signatures. And if I slide the page over, even though I know a lot of you have books, you see a definition written. It's nice and simple. All I'm doing is squaring it and I'm returning it as an integer. I have double coming in, I'm squaring it and returning it as a double. Questions? Okay, good. Stopping the video for today.